Sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. As strange as that may sound, that may be the only way to win certain king and pawn endgames. In this position, white wishes it was black's turn to move because black would be forced to weaken the position. If black plays king to c5, guarding the passed pawn, white would simply play e6 followed by f5, when white's connected passed pawns would force black to give up the c4 pawn and enter a completely losing position. Of course, if black blocks the e5 pawn with king e6, white would simply capture black's pawn. With white to move, what is white to do? White can win the game by using a concept known as triangulation. Triangulation is a king maneuver that loses a tempo, giving your opponent the move. White will triangulate the king using the squares c3, c2, and d2, forming a triangle. White will take 2 steps back to take 1 step forward, losing a key tempo in the process. After king c2, white begins the triangulation plan. If black plays king c5, white uses the same plan we mentioned with e6 and f5. Black's king cannot move forward with king d4, as white's passed pawn would promote after e6. Black's only try is king e6. Since king c3 and king d5 repeats moves, white wastes a move before returning to c3 with king d2. Black cannot plan to capture the f4 pawn because if black captures it, white's passed e-pawn cannot be stopped. Black tries to protect the c4 pawn by playing king d5. After taking 2 steps back, now it's white's turn to take a step forward with king c3. White has triangulated the king, entering the starting position, except this time it is black to move. After losing a tempo, handing the move to black, triangulation has put black into zugzwang. Any move black plays will allow white to make progress and win the game. Let's take a look at another example of triangulation. In this position, white had just moved the king to d1. Before Grandmaster Viktor Korchnoi playing the black pieces made a move, white decided to resign. Why would white do this? White realized that Grandmaster Korchnoi would win the game using triangulation. Let's see why black needs to be careful in this position. If black rushes forward with king d3, after king e1 and e2, it looks like white's king is going to be forced away from the promotion square with an easy win for black. Unfortunately for black, white has the drawing resource g5. After f takes g5 and g4, black is forced to give up the e2 pawn to avoid stalemate, and after king e4, king takes e2, king f4, king f2, king takes g4, king g2, white gains the opposition and should draw the game. Black needs to triangulate the king using the d4, d5, and e5 squares. After king d5, black begins the triangulation plan. If white plays king e2, black will play king e4, taking over opposition, and after the king moves, black will take over the key f3 square, capturing white's pawns. After king e1, black does not move back to d4 when king d1 would repeat the position. The winning move is king e5. Black wastes a move before returning to the d4 square, the key move in triangulation. White now has a choice to move to d1 or f1. If white plays king f1, black completes triangulation with king d4, king e1, king d3, king d1, e2 check, king e1, and king e3. We enter the same position that will lose for white after white's other king move, king d1. Let's take a look. We reach the same position after king d1 and king d4. We have returned to the original position, except this time it is white to move. Let's see why this is important after king e1, king d3, king d1, e2 check, king e1, and king e3. We have reached the critical position. White's king does not have any legal moves and is forced to push the g-pawn. After g5, f takes g5, and g4. Because black's king is on e3, black can now play king f3, forcing king d2, when black wins the game with king f2. Now that you've learned how to win an endgame by losing a move, let's put your triangulation skills to the test.